sometimes struggle to get up in the morning or wind down for bed at night? I used to find it so difficult. I woke up with no sense of positivity and brightness. I was void of motivation and spirit. This changed completely when I started waking up with a Lumi body clock. These incredible devices mimic the light and colour of a real sunrise and sunset, transforming the experience of waking up and going to sleep completely. Rather than being suddenly woken up with an alarm clock, the Lumi body clock will wake you up gradually with a natural sunrise. The Lumi body clock has been shown to improve the quality of sleep and awakening and to boost mood and productivity in clinical trials. You can personalise your sunrise and sunset from 15 to 90 minutes with their clinically tested unique natural light and more than 20 sleep and wake sounds. We all deserve to sleep well and to wake up feeling fresh. So if you're finding this a challenge and you want to try a new approach, go to lumi.com.
Well, there's no doubt that we were a family born into music. My dad was a singer. He had been a big band cabaret singer in the early days, in his 20s and early 30s. And I think I saw him perform when I was 2 or 3 years old, and it made a lasting impression. And of course, there were, he was a music aficionado. So, we had a great stereo as early as 1961 or 62. And he bought only the best records, whether they were, Coltrane or Miles Davis or opera, or big band, or he loved Latin music too. And he was just really deeply into artistry. So it really had a profound effect on us.
And from what I know, your first ambition in music was to be a professional drummer. Is that right?
Well, I had, a few options that I thought that were open to me. I think maybe a confluence or a conflict of ideas. I loved literature. I loved, at that time, I loved the like poets, loved to read through them. So I really thought that I would like to get into the teaching and being a professor of literature. And I also started playing the drums when I was 9 or 10. And then I was torn between that because I wanted to see the world. So I wanted to join the Canadian Royal Navy, the Royal Canadian Navy. And so I think I mixed all those things into one later on in my life. So I got to see the world, write my own lyrics, and be a musician.
Yeah, that's very true. That's one of the things about being a musician. Well, if you're a successful musician like you became and have become, is that you get to travel. But in terms of you wanting to play the drums, were there any drummers that you specifically really admired?
Of course, in the beginning, of course, one of the early guys, was Gene Krupa, big band drummer, and he had a certain feel and time, all the paradiddles and stuff. But it was, even today when you listen to those 1930s recording, early 40s recording, he had a kind of drive that drove the band. And then after that, of course, Buddy Rich, became the Wonder Boy, became the guy. I don't think anybody could really surpass his technique and his flamboyancy and just sheer skill, dominance too. Then after that, from Joe Morello to Alvin Jones to, so many great jazz, Tony Williams, jazz drummers, Dee Jeanette, and so on and so forth, that I really totally was into. It always was a part of my life. Even making the early records, I always carefully chose the drummers who would record or tour with the band. Whether it was Graham Lear or Vinnie Caliuta or Enzo Tedesco at the time. They were always crack guys. And remember, when I was starting off, 19, 20 years old, there were really no such thing as fusion drummers. You either played jazz or you played rock or you played whatever, traditional music. But very, very few guys, and maybe Billy Cobham started the fusion thing, but he had his particular style that wouldn't really fit what I was doing. So it took a long time to really find, and in a sense, we were sort of training on the job in a sense, because we'd be recording those albums and I'd be asking for a jazz feel on top, but a sort of a rock feel at the bottom, and with kick drums and snare doing certain 2 and 4s and certain syncopation on them. on the kick drum, and then swinging on the top and doing various things on the hi-hat. And that really started, at least for me, my penchant for mixing the two. And by the time we got to Brother and Nightwalker, I mean, with Mark Craney and Vinnie Colaiuta, I mean, some of those drum tracks are still stand up today.
Well, a lot of the music that you've made, all of the music that you've made, in my opinion, stands up today. But then again, you know, I'm of the belief that I don't know whether anything that new has been built on some of the stuff, at least in popular music, that was recorded in the 70s and 80s. I just love that stuff so much, and I keep going back to it. But anyway, so what I wanted to know was, you got your first record deal when you were quite young.
Yep.
How old were you, and what was the story there?
I was not quite 21 yet. The first record deal was in Canada. I mean, I got in Montreal. I signed with RCA Victor when I was 17 years old. Right?
Yeah.
And that was a great lesson. I got to understand. It's a crazy day, you know. I mean, I was in a band. We're called Soulmates, and there was an agent that came to one of the gigs. We used to play the Boulevard de Paris, which is like a downstairs hole. And it really was the shadiest place in town, but it was a place to play. And I was 16, and I would play there almost every weekend. And there was an agent that came and said, "Would you like to audition one day for maybe a record company?" I said, "Well, maybe." She asked me. Her name was Jocelyn LeBlanc. She said, "Do you write?" He's saying, I said, "Yes, I'm working on it." And I started when I was 14, 15, and I already had 4 or 5 songs. And anyways, I get a call on the weekend from Jocelyn. She said, "Monday morning, can you duke school for a couple of hours and come do a demo for RCA Victor?" And so I did, and I went to RCA Victor, and there were no musicians there. So I said, "Well," and they just said, "Make your demo." And so I thought about a couple of songs, and I imagined what was going on top, and I built my drum track. I grabbed a bass that was hanging around there, put a guitar track, put a little piano, made a demo, and I went home, and I remember my dad saying, "It's not going to be so easy," you know. And anyways, a week later they called me and said, "You know, we're going to sign you. Let's record our first song." And so that was a kind of a big deal, you know, for me. And then I quickly realized that Canada was so much in its infancy stages as far as recording, that producers, engineers, the equipment, I just couldn't get the things that I wanted to get. There was, I mean, I was naive myself, and it's like if you were going to do a vocal to a song, how would you get that sound where the vocal sounds so present, so you can whisper and you can do certain things, certain inflections? I didn't have an engineer who would say, "Well, okay, let's move you six inches, you know, to the microphone. Let's put this windscreen, and let's put this preamp, and we'll put this de-esser and this and that. So therefore, you can really eat the microphone and sing softly." I wish I would have had someone like that. It was all head scratching stuff. So I realized that very quickly, and so I asked for my release, and by 18 years old, I just packed up and moved to New York, and that was a very, very educational part of my life.
Yeah,
and finally, we got a real record deal with A&M Records when I was just a little over 20.
And that sounds like it was quite a tough time just before you got that record deal. Would that be fair to say?
Well, I lived off and on for about a year and a half in New York, and I remember getting to New York. This is crazy stuff, you know. Anybody who says that it's not a spiritual undertaking doesn't know what they're talking about, because you are really walking into the great unknown, and all you have are your spider senses. And what your spider senses are really communicating with is the possibilities. So some people call it prayer, but you can call it communication, you know, and it's like, where should I be? Well, this is what my desires are. And anyways, so I was, the first day in New York, I was staying with my cousins. I was sleeping in their collie's bed. And then they kicked me out 2 weeks later because their collie kept getting pissed at me. And so I was going to go home, but I figured, no, I'm going to hang out even if I got to sleep in a park bench. It was warm enough. And so I was walking around downtown with my guitar, and the guy comes up and says, "You play guitar?" I said, "Well, a little bit." I said, "I'm a singer-songwriter." And he said, "Are you any good?" I don't know. I said, if you got a seat somewhere, I'll play for you. He says, come to my office. So anyways, it was long and short of it. It was the guy who produced the Zegler and Evans song in the year 2525. And so I went up to his office, and Ted Darrow and I, he just passed away this year, became very good friends. And I stayed at his mother's house, for 2 months while we made demos for various companies. And we made a demo for Capitol Records, and Capitol wanted to sign me. And I was too stupid to understand that it was a good deal, and I was looking for something else. I was full of vinegar in those days. So, but anyways, things kept opening up and happening just because I was willing to put my foot in the Red Sea.
Yeah, you seemed very plucky, and particularly the story with how you got the deal with A&M. I mean, it's better if you tell it, because it just sounds unbelievably determined of you.
It is. We had after my sojourn in New York, I came home really empty-handed after all that, and I was very, very depressed about it. And I was about 19 years old, and then of course I was always one for my own kind of prayer. I'd sit down somewhere quiet and just ask myself questions, because I knew somewhere inside of me there was some sort of motherboard that I could plug into. And I knew what the answer was. And the answer was to form a band, play in Montreal. I was good enough to do that, save up $4,000 or $5,000, which is a lot of money in those days, build a little studio, make demos, and then head out to California. And that's what I did for 4 or 5 months. I put together a band called Gino Vannelli and Good Friends. We became quite the attraction in Montreal at the time, all the biggest clubs. We got, I just stopped short of being offered, I think it was $5,000 a week in Las Vegas. By that time, we had $4,700, I think it was, in the piggy. And I looked at my brother, I said, this is really tempting, but if we go to Las Vegas and start earning that money, that means we're going to start spending it, and that means my dream is gone. And that means, no, this is what we have now. We have the money we need. Let's take $2,500. Let's go build our studio. And in those days, the 4-track Sony machine was just coming out, and that was like $600, $700. We bought a little board for $700, and so on and so forth. So we quit the band, broke up the band, stayed home for 4 months, and made 6 demos. And then we had $2,000 left or something like that. In those days, it was $200 a flight to California. Took a flight, we stayed in California for 4 months, knocking on doors. And we knocked on every door, including Frank Sinatra's door. I mean, it's just... Oh yeah, we were in Palm Springs, and we met Jilly Rizzo and all those guys, all the boys in the band. So finally,
my God.
Yeah, I know. Finally, it was 4 months later, and we had $5 left. The room was costing us $5 a day. It was right on Sunset Boulevard. It was called the Orange Motel at that time. And it was the day before Christmas Eve. And my brother said, we're out of money. Mom sent $35 to Hollywood, Florida instead of Hollywood, California by mistake. And we need to leave. And I said, I can't go. He says, well, I don't know what you're going to do. He says, but he says, we're out of money. I said, well, if I got a panhandle, I'm going to panhandle. So that morning I went to, that night I went to bed, and we were supposed to leave the day after, and I just couldn't do it. So I woke up at 5 in the morning, started walking the streets, and I ended up in a church. And I needed the quiet. I needed to go in that place where I could talk to myself. And so I went and sat in the pew, and luckily it was open. And it brought back a lot of early childhood days. And I fell asleep, long and short of it. I woke up 4 hours, and it rolled like a B-roll in my head. I ran to the hotel room, and I grabbed my guitar, grabbed my brother. I said, you're coming. We just parked ourselves in front of a lot of A&M, the Charlie Chaplin studios. And the guard up in the guard tower came down a few times, warning us not to trespass. And I just said, hey, I'm on the sidewalk. public property. And then 3 hours later, I saw Herb Alpert, the A of A&M Records at the time, walk across the parking lot. And I said, that's what I saw. And I dropped my guitar. I ran through the gates, and of course, the guard chased me. I know I had a real head start on him because he had a bad limp. He was a Vietnam vet. And just as I got to Herb, I grabbed him by the arm. He turned around. He got white very, very quickly. Turns out that his wife, Lonnie Hall, there was an attempted kidnapping on her life, and he thought this might be round 2 or something like that. In any case, by the time I just said my first word, Johnny, I later learned his name. The guard was hauling me off, driving me off away, swearing at me. And I just turned around and looked at Herb. And for a second, we just made a connection. Herb said, just a second. And he beckoned me over. And I said, what are you looking for? I said, just listen to me. I came all the way from Montreal. And I said, hear my songs. He just waited for the longest time. And wrote me a little pass. Says, come back in 30 minutes. And so I went back to the room, practiced a little bit, came back with my cheap Aria flamenco guitar, and played him some songs that we later recorded. And he had his head down, folded in his folded arms, and just lifted his head up, and he just said, welcome to the family. And it was the Christmas Eve, and I just went home, and 3 weeks later, I was in the thick of it, recording my first record.
Wow. That is just such an amazing story. And I mean, it's one of those moments where you sort of wonder if anything that you did was different, what would have happened?
Well, you know, we really, like I said, you know, people in the arts, you know, it's like this everywhere, but especially people in the arts, you're really on your own, and you don't have anything but your deepest instincts and senses. So, you know, I was raised a very deeply religious Catholic, and then by 9 or 10 or 12, maybe no 10, it just didn't make sense to me, and I left it brusquely, and I wanted nothing to do with it. But it taught me about discipline, and it taught me about that there could be a possible connection to things that we don't understand, little like neural pathways that happen in the air that we can't see. And I became a firm believer in that because my instincts always end up serving me. Not perfectly, but usually, you know, led me to the right things. So obviously after that, it was great to get the deal. It was great to start the recording. But I always asked myself that question: how come I knew? How come I saw it? And it stayed with me all these years. And I never derided it, but I questioned it. I wondered about it. And other things happened of that similar nature, always to lead me to believe that every man, every woman has their own deep, very, very deep instincts. And that if we trace and if we follow those instincts, usually they lead to the right places.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the sort of conclusion that you draw when reading about it and hearing these stories, that, you know, if it hadn't been that situation, if it hadn't been, you know, that parking lot, if it hadn't been Herb Alpert, who's also obviously a incredible musician, if it hadn't been that situation, it probably would have been another situation, because it didn't sound like anything was going to stop you. So after that, and after the release, you know, recording and release of Crazy Life, what was it like to be invited to be, you know, on Soul Train, which was, by the sounds of things, back in those days, such a wonderful television program?
Yeah, it was a big deal. Again, this sort of divine serendipity, you know, that kept happening. I was recording Powerful People record, and I was a little frustrated with the way it was going. And so I went out by poolside at a place called the Hallmark Hotel, and that used to be the hip place for all the R&B guys, you know, to kind of stay. And so we liked staying there because they were very musician friendly. And I went by poolside and I fell asleep, and then I woke up to hearing "It's a Crazy Life, a Hazy Life." I said, that's a pretty good song. Wait a minute, that's my song. And I said, where's that coming from? It was echoing off the buildings, you know, because the pool was within the motel. And so I traced it, and lo and behold, it was Stevie Wonder and his brother. And his brother kind of nudges Stevie and says, hey, that's the guy with the hair, you know, who wrote and sang the song. So Steve and I exchanged hugs and greetings and all that. And then he just threw in this, hey, you know, Shaka Khan is not going to be able to make 7 or 8 concerts. Would you like to open up for me? And I remember saying, yes, but, you know, am I going to get killed, or, you know, do you think it's right? And he just said, don't worry, my audience is very open. They're going to love you. So I just took his word for it. And he was very gracious, because he would come on stage and introduce me. And after my set, he'd come on and say, wasn't that great, folks, and stuff like that. So he was super gracious. And in 1974, you couldn't be, you know, bigger than Stevie Wonder. So while I was on tour, I was in Cincinnati, and I get a call. And it's the unmistakable voice of Don Cornelius, who heard that I was on tour with Stevie Wonder, and asked me if I wanted to do Soul Train. And I said, well, Don, I said, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of me, but I'm not black. You know, I'm a white guy. And he goes, and it's typical, we know. He says, but we here consider you off-white, you know, so he invited me, and I said, may I ask a favor? And he said, what is it? I said, can I do a live version of People Gotta Move, so it's just not lip syncing the record? He said, you're welcome to do anything you want to do, which was just fantastic. And that couple, Stevie Wonder and Don Cornelius, Soul Train, it drove People Gotta Move into the top 20 R&B charts, which was very cool for me, for my first real major single release on A&M. And the record ended up selling close to like 400,000 or something like that. And so there I was, 22 years old, already things were moving. And then I had other decisions to make, you know, because music was coming out of me. And I had really no control what kind of music it was. It was just naturally coming out of me. And so when I wrote Storm at Sunup, I realized I didn't have a very super commercial record. That was the record after. And in fact, didn't want to release it because it wasn't very commercial. And I said, I promise I'll tour. And I said, please release the record. And I did, and they did. And the record was successful. So that was the story of my career in the 70s until I just want to stop. And then we, you know, kind of had a big platinum record and all. But go ahead.
But those records, you know, Storm at Sunup and Gist of the Gemini, you know, they still ended up going gold.
Yeah.
You know, like they obviously they didn't start off kind of like, I mean, they charted, but they weren't like they weren't like brother to brother. You must have toured them and promoted them and worked really hard.
I did. It took a year. I mean, when we were doing Gist of the Gemini, we were in your native land. We were staying in Surrey and rehearsing with the band, and then we went to Air Studios to record Gist of the Gemini with Jeff Emmerich. And wow. And that was a great experience.
Incredible.
Jerry Moss came to our flat in Mayfair and said, you know, you were right. He says, Storm at Sunup is almost at 300,000 units, no single. It just keeps selling in dribs and drabs, but it does sell every week. And so it finally did go gold. But more importantly than that, Tom, is that for me, I was after a long-term career. And I like the fact that I could sell 500,000 records without a single, and that I can go tour and sell out 3,000 to 5,000 seats everywhere I went. And that to me was really good, because I knew I had a lot that I wanted to do in my life, and I wasn't interested in a flash in the pan. And that's what I resisted about having a super commercial hit single, because I knew once you get into that fast lane, there's going to be everybody else in that fast lane you're competing with, and I'm not sure that I want to compete, you know, in that fast lane, because it's a lane where a lot of accidents incur.
And also, it seems that once you make that your aim that it's got to be hit singles. There have been examples, you see them all the time, of just very subpar recordings, recordings that aren't reflective of an artist's talent or even their taste being made just to sort of satisfy numbers. So is that something that you were conscious of that early then, that you never wanted to like sell out or whatever?
Well, it's because it's not exactly a sellout the way people look at it. You know, some cigar and chomping guy telling you what to record. It's sort of a meeting of the mediocre minds, and sort of a corporate decision. You know, well, if we take the bridge and just do that, or don't, you know, pare it down, or sing this song, maybe you could add a lyric, or it's like four people trying to make a decision instead of someone with a vision. You know, when you listen to those early Steely Dan records or those early Stevie Wonder records and Marvin Gaye records, it's really a single vision. Now, of course, there's other people there to help bring that vision, but they see the vision and they help bring that vision to the fore. They help flesh it out. And it's just like when you read the whole book of how The Godfather was made, Coppola. I mean, that was a struggle from beginning to end, but he had the vision. And he kept cajoling everybody, you know, wheedling everybody to complete that vision. And at any moment, that vision could have been, they wanted to turn into a cheap gangster movie, but he was interested in the saga, the drama, the inside story of who these people really were. And of course, he had a romantic vision of it, but that was the beauty of it. And so for me, I was always very conscious of the fact that, you know, a vision is a very pure thing. Now, it could be changed, bent a little bit, packaged, but its kernel, its source, its essence has to be held intact. And so for me, whether it was the Gist of the Gemini or Poplar Paradise, even Brother to Brother, I mean, I Just Want to Stop, but I decided to go for a pared down, less orchestral, more of an R&B crossover record with some fusion attributes to it. So I decided to get into that. And that's why the album still had integrity, though it was commercial. But the bad thing about it is that once I had a top 5 single and once I have an album that sold over 1 million copies, now the whole thing is to do it again. And then that's what I did do it again with Living Inside Myself, and another, I think, number 5 or number 6 single, and a gold album, but I didn't want to do it anymore. I just, that's not the kind of life and career I wanted, because even with Living Inside Myself, I remember the time Clive Davis had a computer tested. He really drove me crazy, saying, you need to change the title. It's too insular. It's too this. It's too that. And I really tried to please him by listening, because I was a really great listener too. And after a month, I called him. I said, it can't be changed. It is what it is. And I said, this is my best. It came out that way, and it's going to stay this way. The person is living inside himself, and he's expressing himself, and that's it. And I mean, you know, I guess fate was, you know, the winds were with me, because the song's a big song. But by that time, Tom, I got very, very leery and wary of becoming the artist that always had to have hits. I just wanted to record. Songs, material, and I didn't care that much if they were platinum or even gold. As long as they made the company money, as long as everybody was happy, that was fine for me.
So do you look back on that as a really special, amazing time in your life, like some, or it sounds like there were pros and cons to it. It doesn't sound like it was.
An experience is always shadow and light. I mean, you know, you can't have one without the other. So, of course, you know, there's arguments with the brothers, there's arguments with managers, there's arguments with the record deal. But in the end, and those arguments are healthy, in the end, if an artist doesn't have a vision, there is no art. That's really what it comes down to. And so a lot of these corporate entities are not really high on vision, they're high on packaging. Oh, you look like this. You're kind of a romantic looking guy. Therefore, this is where you're going to be. We want to package you this way. They're really good at marketing, But marketing is very, as you well know, it's window dressing.
Yeah,
So
it's not the substance.
No, it's not. So, I mean, I really respected groups at the time like Supertramp, Pink Floyd, because I knew they were meticulous. I knew the guy, I was not so much into their music, but I was into their process. And I met the guys from Supertramp. I worked with their engineer. I saw how they did their live thing, what kind of system they had, how he would mix them, how they would take their records and bring them live, and how they would make them sound so similar and so great. And so I was really into what made a vision follow through, because that was one thing to have a vision, then how do you make this, flesh out this vision? And so the more progressive, in a sense, the more complicated the music got from Storm at Sunup on, the question was, how do I bring this live? How do I turn this into a show? And a lot of those groups that I was an admirer of really helped me understand that.
I mean, the fact is that in my view, from listening to your back catalogue, you never deviated, even with your hit singles, from being you can just tell the records were made by people who care very, very deeply about music and don't want to engage necessarily too much in the superficial rat race of chasing hit singles. But one question that I feel is almost obligatory to ask, even though it might be a bit irritating, is what do you make of the term yacht rock?
Yacht rock? Oh,
have you ever heard the term?
Yes, of course. A lot of people, older rockers, are doing cruises and things like that, and it's everybody needs to have work, and they can call it what they want. I'm sure the group won't call it yacht rock, because I've done one or two of them. By the time you're doing your concert, I don't care where I am. I could be in a German hangar. I've done a lot of concerts, in German hangars, or a cruise ship or wherever. I lose myself in the music, and I'm hearing the band, and I just do what I'm going to do. Those kind of marketing tools, everyone's going to find. I mean, they call the most sacred things, and I'm sure that Leonardo da Vinci's been called things that are questionable. So I think there was a book written, The Fool, and it was about Jesus Christ. Was he a fool for having, just was he mistaken? So no one's beyond people's cynicism, so I don't really pay attention to that.
Yeah, quite right. And also, I mean, to be honest, for me, yacht rock has turned into a marker of quality. I literally, if something's called yacht rock, I think, all right, that's probably pretty good then, as long as it was from that sort of era. Because like the most followed yacht rock playlist on Spotify is like, Herbie Hancock, and your music's on there, and Steely Dan is on there, and lots of wonderful recordings are on there. And so I just think, that's amazing.
It's a misnomer, but whatever, it's okay. It's people growing up that can afford to take cruises, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So when you got to the 80s, and your success continued, do you look back at the album Black Cars as a special album? Because obviously, it was a platinum record. Is that a record that means a lot to you?
It served its purpose, because at that moment in time, I went through a terrible situation with Arista Records. They didn't want to release my records, neither release me from my contract. And they wanted huge amounts of money for anybody else to buy my contract. So basically, I was blacklisted. And so we found this record company, Dreyfus Records in France, that loved Black Cars. I made that record because I purposely wanted to make an 80s record, purposely. And I just said, okay, if everyone's talking about, MTV, VH1, that what's 70s is old, it's passé. You know how people get. As soon as the decade turns, people don't want to know anything from what happened like 5 years ago or 2 years ago. And so people started telling me, well, why don't you do something modern? I said, guys, Nightwalker was 2 years ago. Well, it's because everyone, was into this whole now new marketing, video marketing. And then we had punk, and we had, flaccid punk, come around, and you had groups like Flock of Seagulls and so on and so forth. And all that kind of music started coming down, very electronic. And so people were asking, certain record companies were saying, well, maybe if you made a record like that, we're not into the acoustic vibe anymore. It's like James Taylor is dead, to them. So I said, okay, let me think about it. And I remember going to the NAMM show, and they were looking at the new DX7 and all the little things it could do. I said, I bet you I can make a whole record with that thing. And so I said, Joe, let's use that as the main point of our new record. I said, we're going to take that and a Linn drum machine. I said, do it our own way. And so we made the Black Cars record. And I worked hard on the lyrics and all that, a lot of good stories. And it was a pure 80s pop record. And it went big, and it was my biggest record in Canada and Europe. And it served its purpose. And I had a couple other hits after that, in the 80s. But it was not something that my heart and soul was really, really into. I became more interested in, I went back to college, took minority literature, started studying the humanities and theology, and I became very, very interested in philosophy, the Greek philosophers, and wanted to understand. I went back to my Catholicism, but I went back to understand it through St. Thomas of Aquinas, through St. Augustine, then Meister Eckhart, and it went deep. And so the Catholicism and the Christianity that I was aware of that came sort of surfaced, like this plastic cover that just comes on the surface of the water, was indeed just that, a plastic cover. The water, where that plastic rose from went really deep. And I dove very, very, very deep to try to understand how the Christian culture came about. And in the first century, second century, third century, Nicaea, the Council of Nicaea, and so on and so forth. And then who the heretics were, and who the Essenes were, and who all these people, and what the Apocrypha is, and what the Nag Hammadi is, and the Ancient Sea Scrolls, and things like that. And once I got a pretty good understanding of that, I moved on to the Kabbalah. And I had a teacher that taught me for a year crash course in it. And then he died. He had cancer, and he wanted to teach me everything he could possibly teach me. And then I decided to move from LA because I knew that it was over. I didn't want to be there anymore. And I knew that the world was changing in the sense that I was telling everybody that I bet you in 10 years from now, you could be an artist and live anywhere on the planet. And you don't have to live in a music center per se. And indeed, that's what happened. And so I started making records by the time I moved up to the Northwest, the kind of records I wanted to make with Yonder Tree and Slow Love. And then started working with big bands, in the Netherlands. I did a classical record. And so for me, very, very fulfilling musically. And whatever happened, they did well enough for me to keep making. And so that's all I knew, and that's all I really cared.
And in terms of revisiting your Catholicism, how did you get invited by Pope John Paul II to perform?
That's another one of those serendipitous things. It was 7 o'clock in the morning one Sunday morning, and the business line rang downstairs, and I said, "Who the hell is that?" 7 o'clock in the morning, and I just let it go, and it rang again. So I said, "Okay, I'm going to chew this person out." And so I went down, and this person with a very thick Italian accent asked me if this is Signor Vannelli, and I said, Vinny, is that you? I said, oh no, Vito, is that you? And I said, you know, quit fucking around, you know, and he goes, please, senor, don't say that. And it ended up being that it was one of the higher up bishops from the Vatican. And he said, the Pope, the Papa, he said, would like you to come and perform. He says, it's a specific song that I wrote called Parole per mio padre, which means a word to my father. I don't know how Pope John Paul heard this song, but heard this song and wanted me to sing this song at his Jubilee, his Christmas Jubilee. And I don't know how it happened, but I did do it. And BMG happened to be looking on screen. 100 million people saw the performance and called me the next day and wanted to do a whole album like that, which was a dream of mine because my father used to sing me classical songs all the time when I was a kid. And I was a true fan of French Impressionism. And I wrote the Canto album in 3 months. It was all written and orchestrated. It came that quickly. And I worked with my friend Glenn Morley from Toronto, and it's still a very good album.
Yeah, I mean, I read that you sort of consider that to be one of the best records that you've made. I mean, is that still how you feel about it?
Yes, I mean, The Last Days of Summer, Wayward Lover, Una Rosa Decembre, and Una Sola Voce, and of course, De Esperanza. I mean, really some sophisticated music that I really need to get off my chest. And singing too. I started studying with Tom Blaylock here in Portland, in the Northwest, and I studied with him for 2 years, you know, and I was ready to record, to sing that record. And of course, I didn't want to sing like an opera singer, but I had to employ some of those techniques.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary, the breadth of genres and, you know, areas which you've explored. But it sounds like that was kind of always your intention, and I guess a less spiritual in a sense experience. You know, how did you feel about the whole thing with the Boston Celtics? Becoming a symbol of sorts to them. I mean, much less profound, shall we say? But
yes, I look. Life is full of mundanities, you know, kind of peppered with special moments, and so you know, it just one of those things where I got connected to something that was just a loose connection that started a little fire, and that's all it was. You know, this guy had a Gino T-shirt on, and they I don't know, warmed up to that fact, and I happened to be the face on that T-shirt. And you know, I remember I got calls about it and all that, and I said I had nothing to do with it, you know, but I'm fine with it. If whatever gets their mojo up.
Well, it's that's the thing about music, though. You know, things you make these recordings, you make this art, and then just stuff that's totally like separate, out of your control, just happens, and some of it, you know, has a benefit. We've only briefly touched on the importance of your relationship with your brothers. You know, how much of an impact have they had on your career, and you know, and you know, what's their influence been on your recordings and on your life?
Well, in the beginning with my brother Joe, I mean, that was very impactful because we did everything together. We produced the records together and we toured together, so we were inseparable. And by the mid 80s, you know, my feeling was different. I didn't want to be in LA anymore. I didn't want to make those kind of records anymore. And I wanted another life, especially with the studying that I'd been doing during the mid 80s. And so we just, you know, two roads diverged. And we remain close. We remain, you know, super friendly to this day. With Ross, of course, Ross wrote, you know, I Just Want to Stop. And it was very a big part of Brother to Brother. And by 2008, Ross decided that he could do a better job for me than any manager I had ever had. So Ross said, let me be your manager. And I said, of course. And I think he did a great job, you know. And Of course, that is until COVID came along, and then we all had to hunker down. But we're very close, and he still handles me. And different kind of manager, you know, more of a nurturer than a manager, you know. Like, I think you should be doing this, or maybe we should do this, or it's not like they're not hard and fast marching orders, anything like that. It just seems we go for the logical and the natural.
I mean, that sounds like a wonderful relationship to have, and probably quite different, I'm imagining, from some of the relationships that people have with managers who probably could be quite pushy and less on the nurturing side. Gino, it's been a real honor to talk to you. I wanted to finish off by asking you if you had to recommend some recordings, they can be by you or by other artists that my listeners should check out. They can be anything that just means something to you.
Songs by other artists?
Yeah, songs by other artists or by yourself, in terms of anything that you would, you know, if someone said greatest music of all time, what would come into your head?
Well, you know, I mean, I can only tell you that the first time I heard, you know, a Border song from Elton John, you know, that was stunning, because no one was doing this kind of hybrid classical gospel rock kind of thing the way he was doing it. And Paul Buckmaster was doing the string arrangements, and Gus Dudgeon was you know, producing. And I listened closely, and that and your song were stunning, you know, for 1970-71. And I think and Elton's singing was just amazing, you know. So those two songs were really breakthrough songs for me. And I, you know, the What's Going On album by Marvin Gaye. I mean, there's such a deep groove, such a deep feeling, such a deep sentiment, and this theme, this running theme that goes through the whole record. That I knew people just wore that record out over and played it over and over again. So, I mean, anything from the What's Going On, whether it be Mercy, Mercy Me or What's Going On, was an important record. And of course, I think, you know, the Aja album, you know, by Steely Dan, is still a breakthrough record. Royal Scan was good, but they seem to hit a threshold or a summit with Asia, and the cut itself was, you know, with the drum solo on it, Steve Gadd's solo was pretty great. I know that it affected me when I did Brother to Brother. You know, that I said I got to put a drum solo like that, you know, on the record, and that's what we had, the drum solo in Brother to Brother. And for a fourth artist, I'd have to throw in Weather Report. You know, that album, the Heavy Weather album, Teen Town and all that, you know, Jocko and Zawinul, these guys were really on top of it. They were breakthrough stuff, you know, and it really affected everybody deeply. It affected pop music in a sort of indirect way. So those, I'd have to throw accolades to those artists and those records.
Yeah, those are all wonderful albums. I mean, I need to listen more to Weather Report. I have played it a few times, but I'm still quite early in appreciating jazz.
Well,
I appreciate jazz.
You've got a lot of knowledge. You're a real musicologist for your age. So, and you probably realize how a lot of stuff today doesn't measure up to those kind of things, because and there's only one reason. The only one reason is that that's all we had. It was focused.
Well, we
didn't have these iPhones with 10,000 cuts on them, and we were busy texting everybody all day. All we had was that I'm going to be the next superstar. And so we'd sit down at the guitar or the piano and concentrate, read real books, listen to real records. And it was the only pastime. You know, music was a serious pastime in those days. Today, it's an adjunct to whatever else they seem, or you seem to be doing. It's just the times we live in. It's not good, bad. It's just, it is what it is. But if people such as yourself want to really listen to dedicated stuff, I mean, it starts really in the 20s and 30s. How those records by Duke Ellington and some of the big bands and the singers, Bing Crosby and Sinatra and all the 50s singers, Rosemary Clooney, you know, they were dedicated. I mean, these were artists that could go on stage and sing it, nail it cold. They were so into it. They used to go in the studio and do one take, 2 takes. And it was amazing artists.
They were that good. It was a life.
That good, yeah. And you could hear it. You could hear their confidence when you listen to, you know, Mambo Italian, you know, by Rosemary Clooney, or all the other songs. You just say, wow, this person really nails it beautifully. And but in our era, in the 60s, the late Beatles era, and the 70s, with all the rock groups and all that, you can feel the dedication. It meant everything to those artists. And it's not so today. It's the star lies somewhere else. But if you want to be a musicologist, such as yourself, there's a whole, I mean, there's so much to go back and to look at and to follow how, for instance, people don't know that Bing Crosby was the one who started PA systems for singers.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Because he had a fault. He had a fault that his voice couldn't, he was so soft you couldn't hear him past the 7th seat. So he had a gig in Chicago and they canceled him because he was going to leave his brothers and go solo. Everybody knew how kind of great singer he was, but nobody could hear him. So one day he was in a radio station, and the DJ had the speakers on by mistake. He said, "Do you think you could rig something like that for me?" So the next gig, he took a couple of speakers with a microphone and found that people could hear him, and it changed music.
That is unbelievable. I had no idea about that. And I just want to say that what you said just there is like one of the things that anyone has ever said in doing a lot of episodes of this podcast that just means a lot to me, and really I agree with. And I know that that's something that I want to follow in terms of cutting out the cell phone, cutting out the social media, listening to albums, reading books. And I'm not perfect on it, but my intention is that. And hopefully a lot of other people listening, you know, because we have so many distractions now. And
much of our knowledge today,
not great.
Much of our knowledge today is cursory knowledge. You know,
yeah.
We know a little bit about everything. But if you really, really want to understand, you know, what really motivated Walt Whitman, why he wrote Leaves of Grass, and what his life was, and all the warnings that Emerson gave him: don't print Calamus, don't do all the homosexual stuff and all that. He warned him, and Walt Whitman said, "I am who I am." And so basically he was like the tip of the spear for, you know, civil rights. And people don't realize it's like guys like that were the tip of the spear for civil rights to come. Guys were unabashed and said, "This is who I am." And so when you try to follow, you know, people who have done great things, look at the people before them and you'll see that they were influenced. You'll see that Martin Luther King was very influenced by Gandhi. And Gandhi himself was very influenced by Martin Luther in 1517, who started the Reformation. So, I mean, it's really kind of deep, Tom, you know, and so that's why there's no end to the study, but you'll find there's a lot more than the knowledge that comes to you from Wikipedia or on your cell phone, you know. At one point, you've got to put your nose to the grind and read about it. And say, now I get it.
Yeah, that's very true.
It helps you see what is the thing we want to see in life. We want to see patterns. And when we see patterns, we could avoid bad things and try to go for better things, right? That's what science is. It's patterns, recognizing patterns. And so when you study history like that, you say, suddenly when you're studying, like I'm studying now, a book called The Indispensables, it's really about the Revolutionary War in the United States, how it really took place, and the subtleties between the patriots and the loyalists in the same country, in the same city, on the same block. You start to see patterns today with people still doing the same things, going against their neighbors for who knows what reason. So when you start to see the patterns in your life, life begins to make sense in the sense, okay, I see what's happening here. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go here. So you're still a young guy. So when you see patterns, you'll avoid a lot of problems.